great visit with my mom. Can we close that other door there? It's the sun's reflecting, right? Yeah. I can barely see now without that. But we had wonderful. I said I had a wonderful trip. No catastrophes of any time. We appreciate that. And but I got to visit with the congregation there at Bluff City. It's a very old congregation back. I guess it's probably in the 1800s. A little small congregation. They've expanded, and they've got about 25 or 30 people now. But it's a little country congregation, all family type, and they are some wonderful people there. Enjoy it. Anytime you're in and around Bluff City, Arkansas, you stop in. They'll welcome you, I guarantee you. We're studying in the book of Acts, the 7th chapter, and I think we got down to somewhere in the vicinity of about verse 20, maybe a little bit after that. But we want to go back to actually verse 20 through about verse 43. We're going to be dealing with that, or maybe even some other stuff as well. But there's several things that Stephen is talking to these individuals about. And thus far, they're in pretty well agreement. He's giving them a history of the Jews themselves, which at this time, even though they were false accusers, they were willing to listen to what Stephen had to say. He's defending himself before the council or before the Sanhedrin. And they're pretty well saying, okay, he's thus far telling the truth. There's nothing wrong with these things thus far. So whenever you begin to tell, when Stephen begins to tell these things, they begin to doubt, well, maybe, and we're speculating here, maybe these accusers are not true. Now, back in this time, how many accusers did they have to have before somebody could be actually brought to trial? Two. And what did they have to also do? They have to agree. Okay. So whenever they're being the accusers being examined, their story has to agree. Otherwise, the case is dismissed. So here is Stephen. He's defending himself. And who's with Stephen? Who's giving Stephen the ability to talk to these individuals and telling them these things? What was he? Remember what he was talking about us for earlier? These were men of God, faithful, and they were to be full of what? Right living, righteousness. And what did God say he'd be with them? So is this not the idea here that Stephen is being, Stephen is speaking these things by God's help? I think so. I believe so. So he's telling them all these things. They were aware of it. Boy, they eating it up, as the expression is. This is exactly true. That's right. Abraham was the father. And, surprising thing to me, instead of going all the way back to when creation in Genesis 1 and 2, they just go back to just Abraham. They're not willing to go all the way back to when man began. They just want to go to Abraham. Why is that? Or why do you think that would be the case? Anybody? Sir?
They were the seed of promise.
That was the promise. And because the seed promise or the land promise and the blessings to all the world was given to Abraham, that's as far back as they wanted to go. Even though it was beginning in what? Genesis 3? About verse 15, first promise. All right. So here's all these things. They were aware of all these things. So these are not dummies, as we might say. So Stephen begins there in, let's say, I guess about verse 20. Stephen had been charged with, like I said, blasphemy. We talked about that already, know what that is dealing with. And we know that he was not guilty of blasphemy. And we can also see there, beginning with about verse 20, well, actually through about verse 20 through about verse 22. Notice what it said. And this time Moses was born. At this time Moses was born. I'm reading out of the New American Standard. At this time Moses was born and was well pleasing to God, and he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. Notice next verse. But when he was set out, in other words, he's growing up. You know what happens to a child whenever they about 3 months old? They begin to kind of they begin to, well, I want something to eat, or I want this, or I want that. Even though they're small children, you can't hide them very long. So here is this idea. He is now becoming more of a problem to hide, we might say, because what had taken place earlier? All right, the king had made a decree, did not, that all the male children from what year was it? I was thinking it was 7 and under. I may be wrong about that. Anybody remember? But Paul, you, huh? Was it 2 and under? 2 and under. Okay. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, the decree had come to all the male children were to be killed. Females were to be spared because the population of the Israelites had become so great and was growing by leaps and bounds. And so here's a problem. So kill all these. Well, Moses was spared. Now notice there in the next verse there, but when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in works and words and deeds. So now Moses was an individual that was aware of the Egyptian traditions, correct? All right. Who was teaching him also at home, or was taking care of him in the castle? His own mother. So do you think that she probably had a great influence upon him as well? Now, there was a times that he was being taught the Egyptian ways, yes. But what happens whenever a child, the religious world says that if you give me your child for the first 5 years of its life, it will never go back. 5 years, first 5 years of its life. Ma'am?
Those are the most impressionable.
All right. The communist people, I did some research several years ago when I was in high school. They had made a statement similar to that. If you give us your child for its first 5 years, it will be a communist rest of its life. So this is the idea here as well. His mother is teaching him the things that needs to be taught him as far as the Israelite concerned, as well as being taught the deeds or the traditions or the laws of the Egyptians. So he was a mighty individual as far as maybe in his writings. Some have said as far as his words, the idea of his writings, not necessarily his speech. Because what was the thing that Moses had a little problem with whenever God called him? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. When God called him, oh, Lord, I'm not eloquent. You know, I can't, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I'm not eloquent. What was God's statement? What did God tell him? Yeah, he said, wait just a minute. Who made your mouth? Who gave you this ability? Why is it that you're saying I can't do this? God said, I can. Did the Lord get upset about this? He did. He did. And he reprimanded Moses. And finally, in his anger, he said, well, that Aaron is coming and he can be your spokesman. You tell him what to do, what to say. But the point is this, God is making a statement. Who is the creator of all these things? Who has power over all these things? Seemed like Moses, even though he was a great man of leadership and maybe of great deeds, it says here, and of words, seemed like he had forgotten who had created him. So here's the thing that Moses is facing. Okay. Any questions?
So it is just newborn babies, newborn male babies that were to be killed. There wasn't an age limit, just newborn.
Was it newborns? Okay, I couldn't remember.
How long that was supposed to last.
Okay. Like I said, I could not remember. I appreciate that. Okay.
Now Herod, they were 2 years old.
2 years and under.
That was Herod.
Herod.
Yeah, that was Herod when Jesus was born. Maybe that's what I was thinking about. But anyway, regardless, the decree was that the male children were to be killed anyway. All righty. So here is Moses. He's being brought up in the castle or the kingdom or whatever palace of the Pharaoh. So he was aware of the things it was about. He was aware of the laws. Now let's notice our next verse there, beginning with let's say about verse 23 through about verse 28. Now again, here is as the record says, and let's begin there. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. We talk about that, verse 22. And when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. Now remember, Moses' life was divided into how many 40-year periods? 3, that's correct. Here's the first 40. That is that whenever he is in the land of Egypt. So 40 years that he has been taught not only the law of God, but also the law of the Egyptians. Do you think that he's also had an influence as far as his life was concerned? I think he probably did. But who was overshadowing his life? Who had a greater influence on him than the Egyptians? His mother. That's right. Beware, mothers, that you hold that child within your arms and you wonder, as the song used to sing, what will be, how will I be, or how will I grow up, or what you are making and molding that child's life. So be very careful, just as you would mold a piece of clay or something along that line. That's what that child is going to be as we mold that child's life. Okay, and like I said, first few years of its life will basically, in a very strong sense, teach it what's going to be taught, teach it what it's going to be like in the future life. Okay, and notice there in verse 24, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed, and smote the Egyptian. Now, remember what I said as far as the influence.
Moses was born and was exceeding fair and nervous.
Don't hit the wrong button on these things. I have a tendency. It's got a little bitty tiny side here that if I just lay my hand on it, you don't have to touch it. It just goes off. Sorry about that. But we can see here is Moses being influenced again, and here is his brethren. Notice the term here, his brethren. So he was aware of those that were in Egyptian bondage was his brethren, was it not? Okay. And here was the Egyptian taskmaster who was, we do not know what the case may have been. It may have been that he was in a bad mood today or whatever the case may have been. Anyway, he was beating the slave and to the point that it kind of riled up Moses to the point that he killed him. And we can see that well, let's go into our next verse. There in verse 25. For he supposed his brethren would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them, but they understood not. Now, what seems to be the problem within this few verses here? Now they understood, they knew what was going on. Remember, they were a historian or historical. They kept the historical facts going. They practiced that. They knew the story of Moses. But here is Moses as he is talking and telling, or not Moses, but Paul, Luke, I'll get it in a minute, telling the story here. Stephen, yeah, but the writer is what I meant to say. Stephen is telling these things, and what's taking place as far as is these people still are agreeing? They were still in agreement, were they not? There wasn't anything wrong. They were aware of that. And notice there, and for he supposed his brethren would understand. But now, how was probably Moses dressed?
As an Egyptian.
Probably as an Egyptian. Do you think that he's probably maybe in a chariot? Could have been. Remember, he is called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, or maybe I think someone said that it was it granddaughter? Is that right? Something. Anyway, some of the kin folks of the Pharaoh. We'll put it that way. So what is taking place? Here is this individual. He's killed a Egyptian. He's hid him, and his brethren now are fighting amongst themselves. Now, whenever they're fighting among themselves, Moses wants to be a mediator, which is a good thing. Why are you fighting among yourselves? You are brethren. You should be helping one another. You should be doing all you can to alleviate the problems here. And now you're fussing and fighting among yourselves. Why? And whenever Moses confronted them, well, are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? Well, what problem did that arise with Moses? There in verse 26, and the next day he showed himself unto them as they strove and one against another, verse 27. But he that did his neighbor wrong thrust him away, saying, who made thee a ruler or a judge over us? So here was one individual that was kind of cantankerous more than the other one, was it not? Well, what purpose do you have? Why are you doing this? And wilt thou kill me as thou didst the Egyptian yesterday? Then fled Moses at his saying, and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he begat 2 sons. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute as well. But wilt thou kill me? Well, it's almost in the idea of this individual saying, well, I don't really care. You think if you're going to kill me, what are you going to do? The ball is in your park, you know. What are you going to do?
We felt like Moses didn't have any right to interfere between them, since Moses was considered an Egyptian instead of an Israelite. They didn't understand what Moses was going through.
Well, that's true too.
And they were just fighting among themselves. And then whenever he tried to stop it, probably thought he was trying to rule over him and be, a hard taskmaster. But they had seen one of them or all of them. I don't know how many saw him kill the other Egyptian.
What does it kind of sound like there in that verse? What's John 1 verse 11? Is that right? I believe that's right. John 1 verse 11. He came to his own, and his own received him not. Well, this kind of sounds like what's going on here, doesn't it?
They didn't. When Moses came back from Midian and with the, with the law. I mean, with the Aaron and to try to tease. They didn't believe him then.
Okay.
They wanted, oh, send us a deliverer, send us a deliverer. When Moses came, they didn't believe him. He had to prove himself to his own people before they would even try to follow him. That's just people for you today.
And we can see a little bit later, even later on, what did they still rejected him? We'll talk about.
Whenever at the mountain, they thought.
We'll talk about that as far as.
Right, I mean, back to the Red Sea. He's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. He's
Okay.
brought us out here to die. People, you can't help people. That's awful. But you just cannot help some people. You
All right.
help them, and they beat you up. I don't know.
Before?
Stephen is laying out the argument as you follow through this, that they haven't changed a bit.
Mhm.
They don't realize this yet,
That's right.
but he's gonna conclude with you just like your forefathers.
Mm-hmm. And that's
That's what made them mad. Part of what made them mad.
that's very true.
They're fine with it till he says, you're one of those. And when he identifies them as being perpetrators, just like those through history.
Mhm.
As
The
their
words-
forefathers were, then
The
all of
word
a sudden it's not
stiff-necked
so
and
pleasant.
uncircumcised in
Yeah.
heart.
The
Might have done something.
the terms in comparison to deliverers is we have two here, and we talk about that in just a second. Two of the two deliverers had been sent to them, and they rejected them both. Did they not? And yet here is they're trying to teach them this is what God wants. Well, we don't want that.
Not our
And-
idea.
And kind of like we are today. If it's not what we want or what suits us, what do we say?
No,
We don't want that. About like children wanting something to.
Well, that's
to
it.
eat.
It's like, if I can't have it my way, well, I'm just gonna go home, or I'm gonna quit, or I'm gonna, I'm not gonna participate. That's
Yeah.
some challenge.
All right. So this is the things that's going on. So Moses, the thing is, he fled. There was a reason for him fleeing, was it not? What was the penalty of killing an Egyptian? Death. All righty. Now, Pharaoh already knew that Moses was, quote unquote, not a true Egyptian. We might put it that way. Even though he was raised in his palace or in his house, and all these things was going on, he was aware of the things that was being taught, and he was aware of all these things. But what would have happened? Okay, so what would probably have happened, or at least Moses thought would happen, if he found out about it? He'd surely be put to death. Okay. All righty. Now, with that thought in mind, he flees to Midian. And so our next verse there, what is it, verse 29? Then Moses fled at this saying, and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he begot two sons. What was Moses' wife's name? Anybody remember? So far? That's right. What were the two sons' names?
Shechem and, I can't think of his name.
Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Shechem, was it Shechem?
Mm-mm.
One Shechem?
Exodus 18, verse 34.
I used to know this, but I'm getting too old.
Thought there was a little tidbit of history that might kind of help us to
Exodus
get our minds going here.
1. Exodus 1.
One begins with a G and one begins with an E.
Gershom.
Huh?
Gershom.
Gershom.
And Eliezer.
No,
No,
Eliezer.
that was somebody
Eliezer.
Oh,
Eliezer.
who?
Eliezer. Not Eliezer. Eliezer.
What verse?
34.
Chapter?
Exodus,
Eliezer.
the 18th.
Okay.
Verse 3 and 4, I said that. 3 and 4.
I used to know that, but
But anyway, I thought that'd be a little tidbit
my
there.
old
To kind
was
of
just kicking in.
remember some of the history of those individuals. So this is beginning the second phase of Moses' life. And again, these individuals were aware of that, were they not? They knew the background of Moses. You've got to remember this is years years behind, and like I said, these things had been written before, so they were aware of it. So there's no disagreement. Everything is lovely. No problems. And now notice our next verse. And when 40 years were expired, remember we talked about the 3 40-year periods of Moses' life. The verse 30, 31, and keep getting lost. Verse 30. And when Moses was, the 40 years had expired, they appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, an angel of the Lord, and a flame of fire in a bush. Most of these children could tell you the story of Moses and the burning bush. And we can see as far as history records there in, well, actually, let's go to verse 32. And when Moses saw it, verse 31, he wondered at the sight. And as he drew near to behold it, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, I am the Lord thy God, or the Lord of thy fathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses trembled and does not behold. What these are the patriarchs, were they not, of the time? Yes. They were outstanding individuals. Where what is the importance of that? Those are the patriarch. Well, let's go back for just a moment. What age was Moses talking about at this time? Remember, there's 3 periods of time. There's the patriarchal, Mosaic, and the Christian age. All right, the patriarchal age. So what was God requiring of the patriarchs or the heads of the family?
They were the leaders.
God, who in sundry times and divers manners in time past spoke to the fathers. All right. So he is talking to the fathers. These are the fathers of this great nation. Again, they were aware of that. Now, notice what he said there in verse 32. Again, here's the angel that's talking, and he didn't even look. He was what was he afraid of? What do you think he was afraid of? Was he aware that it was God or an angel, or was he didn't know what it was it not?
Going on, because normally a bush would burn up.
Okay.
But this one did not.
It's not. It says it's not been consumed. Okay.
Burning.
All righty. We can see again. All these things are taking place. Now, he also makes a statement there in verse 3. Said the Lord, "Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place where thou standest is holy ground." Now, what does that? What impression do you have on this? Or how does it impress you?
In the presence of the Lord,
We're in the presence of God, and the idea of bowing ourselves before, showing our humble attitude, and not only that, as being the creator of all the universe and all the things that are there, and being in the presence of, well, at this time Moses thought it was God, but and being in the presence of God, he was quite aware of the attitude that he needed to have, is it not? Remember what he was being taught whenever he was a small child, first 40 years of his life. And there's no doubt that he was being influenced again by those around him at that time. What was his father-in-law's name? Jethro. Okay. So there's the influence there. And again, the paper.
Moses had never seen anything like this, and he knew about God, but he didn't. the scriptures really don't say anything about him experiencing anything with God until at this moment, until this time, does it? I mean,
Yeah.
he just wasn't, he was afraid, like any of us would be.
Usually biblical references say when people saw an angel or God or whatever manifestation it was, they were afraid they would die
Mm-hmm.
That's it, yes.
if they looked.
That's correct. And that's the point that I was getting at. Because if it was no man had seen God at any time and lived, made that statement whenever, if you remember, whenever Moses was on Mount Sinai, even God covering his face and passed by, whenever he came down off of the mountain, what did they have to do as far as his face? They had to veil it because of the brightness. Just being in the presence of God, not seeing, but in the presence. And I think also of the time, whenever I was reading this, I was thinking of the time whenever it says there in Genesis 2 and 3, whenever God walked in the garden. Well, that wasn't, I don't think it was God as we would know, the creator of all the universe. I think it was Christ. But talked with Adam and Eve. They were aware. What was the first thing that they did after they had sinned against God? They went and hid themselves. They didn't want to be seen of God. So here's the idea again. To be in the presence of God is an awesome idea. But also, what about us today? Are we constantly in the presence of God?
Yes.
I thought about what Tom was saying there as for a little earlier, as far as there's God is always watching. You know, we fear of the YouTube or whatever else that you might watch. They're aware of what's going on. They know your lifestyle basically, and we say, well, you know, that's my private business. Well, God is watching you as well. So here's the idea again. God was aware of these things, and there's no place to hide from the face of God. All righty. Okay. Notice now, there in verse 34, I have seen. Now again, here is we might say, presence of God from the beauties of heaven as he looks down upon man. Notice also earlier in the book of Genesis, we have recorded the statement, God looked upon man, or looked down from heaven upon man, and saw his thoughts was evil constantly. He was constantly in sin. And what did it say? That God repented God that he had made man? Even to the point that what? He's going to destroy man. But we can find Noah and his sons found grace in the eyes of God. God spared them. God spared the animals and things along that line. So here's the presence of God, and here's also the presence of God's ambassador, we might say. And says, take off your shoes. The ground that you're standing on is holy ground. All these things belongs to God to begin with. We'll just use them. I have seen seen the affliction of my people, which is in Egypt, and I have heard their groanings, and am come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send thee into Egypt. Now, for just a moment's time, can you imagine? Now, Moses had fled. He's been gone how many years? 40 years. So he'd been gone from Egypt for 40 years. And still the penalty, they didn't forget, as the expression is. They didn't forget somebody killing a fellow Egyptian. So now God is saying, Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt. Can you almost imagine his reluctance to say, you do know that if I go back, they're going to kill me. If I go back, they're going to search out. They find out who I am. Surely I'm a dead man. Notice what he said there in the next verse. Then this Moses, whom they refused, saying, "Who made thee a ruler?" And whoops, excuse me. I've done lost my place again. That's terrible, brethren. Whenever you lose, there in verse 35, yes. I will send thee to Egypt, verse 34. This Moses, whom they refused, saying, "Who made thee a ruler or a judge?" The same did God send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the burning bush, or in the bush. What is it saying now? God is aware of it. You don't be afraid, because God is there. You're in the presence of God.
God was there when he killed the Egyptian, and God's with him here.
God was aware of all these things. Why is it that we're afraid sometimes to venture out and do what God says? Why are we sometimes reluctant to do it? Are we afraid of what somebody might say? Have you have we ever had somebody ask, "Are you a Christian?" In fact, I had one come by yesterday from a religious organization. I was outside, and, "Are you a Christian?" "Yes, sir, I am." And he said, "Well, that's good." And I told him, I said, "I go to Plainview Church of Christ." Okay, he left. But anyway, regardless, we should never be afraid to say that I'm a Christian. I'm a child of God. And I've done the things that God commands me, therefore I can be called a Christian or child of God. But yet, anyway, our time is coming and gone again. And let's begin then with verse 36. As far as he became the savior of Israel, but we'll begin there, Lord willing, then next Sunday. Any questions? All right. Thank you.